For more than 2 centuries, something essential was missing from Europe's forests. The European bison, the largest land mammal on the continent, had vanished from the wild. Once roaming freely across vast stretches of Europe, from France to the Caucasus, the species was hunted relentlessly. By the early 1900s, the last wild bison were gone. Only a few dozen survived in captivity behind fences far removed from the ecosystems they once shaped. Romania was no exception. Its forests remained large and seemingly intact, especially in the Carpathian Mountains. Wolves, bears, and lynx still lived there. Trees stood tall. On the surface, the ecosystem looked healthy, but beneath that appearance, something fundamental had been lost. The forest had stopped changing. Without large herbivores like bison, the land became static. Young trees grew densely and uniformly, shrubs filled open areas, grasslands slowly disappeared. Sunlight struggled to reach the forest floor. Biodiversity declined, not dramatically, but steadily. The forest was alive, yet increasingly simplified. By the early 21st century, ecologists recognized the problem. Protecting forests alone was not enough. Europe's ecosystems had evolved alongside large grazing animals. Without them, natural cycles of disturbance, regeneration, and diversity were broken. In 2014, Romania decided to try something radical. A group of European bison were released into the wild in the Tartu Mountains, not into a fenced reserve, not into a managed enclosure, into open, unfenced forest. It was the first time in more than 200 years that bison walked freely on Romanian land. The goal was not to recreate the past for nostalgia, it was to restore a missing ecological function. European bison are often misunderstood. They are not simply large grazers, they are landscape shapers. Their size, weight, and behavior influence how vegetation grows, how soil develops, and how other species move through the land. Where bison roam, ecosystems become patchy instead of uniform. The forest in the Tartu Mountains had become overly dense. Without grazing pressure, saplings crowded the understory. Meadows vanished. Many plant species that depend on open or semi-open habitats declined. With fewer flowering plants, insects suffered. With fewer insects, birds and small mammals followed. The forest was growing older, but not healthier. The reintroduction began cautiously. A small number of bison sourced from conservation breeding programs were transported and released. Each animal was fitted with GPS tracking collars. Scientists monitored their movements, health, and impact closely. Expectations were modest. Forest ecosystems usually change slowly. Any visible effects were expected to take many years. But the forest responded faster than anyone anticipated. Within months, areas used by the bison began to look different. Bison do not graze evenly, they move constantly, feeding selectively. They trample vegetation, break branches, and strip bark from certain trees while leaving others untouched. This creates disturbance, a word that often sounds negative, but in ecology, disturbance is essential. Where bison fed, young trees were suppressed. Sunlight reached the ground. Grass and wildflowers began to grow in places that had been shaded for decades. These open patches expanded as bison returned repeatedly to preferred areas. By the end of the first year, researchers observed a clear change in vegetation structure. The forest was no longer uniform, it had become a mosaic. Meadows reappeared between stands of trees, shrubs were broken up, different plant species occupied different zones. This diversity created opportunities for other life to return. Insects were among the first to respond. Pollinators found flowering plants. Beetles colonized disturbed soil. Butterflies returned to open areas. With them came birds, feeding on insects and nesting in newly varied habitats. Small mammals followed, using grasses and shrubs for food and cover. The impact reached the soil itself. Bison hooves compacted some areas while loosening others. This variation improved infiltration. Rainwater no longer ran off uniformly but pooled in small depressions. Bison wallows, shallow pits formed when animals rolled in dust or mud, collected water and became microhabitats for amphibians and insects. Seeds spread more widely. Bison carried seeds in their fur and digestive systems, depositing them across the landscape. Plants that had been isolated began to reconnect. Genetic diversity increased. The forest floor became more dynamic. Even bison dung played a role. Dung supported beetles, fungi, and microorganisms that break down organic matter and recycle nutrients. These organisms enrich the soil, accelerating decomposition and improving fertility. What appeared messy or destructive was, in fact, productive. Perhaps the most important change was how the forest aged. Before the bison returned, large areas of forest matured at the same pace. Trees grew densely, competed for light, and aged together. With bison present, that pattern broke. Some areas were kept open, others were allowed to mature undisturbed. The result was a layered landscape with trees of different ages, open grasslands, and transitional zones. This structure is critical for biodiversity. Within a year, researchers documented measurable increases in plant diversity and habitat variation. These were not theoretical projections, they were observable changes on the ground. Local communities noticed as well. Trails once choked with brush became passable again without human intervention. Open views returned. The forest felt less closed, less stagnant. Tourism increased as people came to see free-roaming bison, animals many had only known from history books. Importantly, fears of destruction did not materialize. Some had worried that bison would overgraze, damage trees, or destabilize the forest. Instead, their impact was intense but temporary. Bison did not stay in one place long enough to exhaust resources. Their movement prevented long-term degradation. Predators played a role too. Wolves in the region influenced bison behavior. The presence of predators discouraged bison from lingering in vulnerable areas, further spreading their impact across the landscape. This interaction added another layer of balance to the system. The success of the first releases led to expansion. More bison were introduced gradually. The population grew slowly and deliberately. Each animal was monitored, each effect studied. The project combined ancient ecological processes with modern science. What made the outcome remarkable was not just the scale, but the speed. Forests are often thought of as slow-moving systems. Trees grow over decades, soil forms over centuries. But when a missing keystone species returns, change can accelerate dramatically. The ecosystem had not forgotten how to function. It had simply been waiting for the right influence. The bison provided that influence. This story challenges a common conservation mindset that protecting nature means preventing change. In reality, ecosystems depend on disturbance. Without it, they simplify and weaken. The forest was not dying because it lacked trees. It was dying because it lacked movement. Bison brought movement back. They did not plant seeds deliberately. They did not manage the land intentionally. They did not restore the forest by design. They simply lived. And through that, the ecosystem reorganized itself. Today, the Tarku Mountains host one of Europe's largest free-roaming bison populations. The forest continues to evolve, not toward uniformity, but toward diversity. Meadows expand and contract, trees regenerate unevenly, wildlife responds. Romania's bison reintroduction is now considered one of Europe's most successful rewilding projects. It demonstrates that even landscapes altered by centuries of human absence and presence can recover lost processes. This is not a story about turning back time. It is a story about restoring function. Europe did not lose healthy forests because it lost trees. It lost them because it lost animals that shaped them. When the bison returned, the forest remembered how to change.